This is actually pretty hilarious. Okay, now if you guys have not, and most people have not seen this, this segment has not done well considering how many subscribers each of these guys have on their channels here. But there's a new supergroup on YouTube called the Leftist Mafia, which is hosted on David Dole's channel. So it's
this is no traveling Wilburys, we'll tell you that.
That's what I was gonna say. It's the traveling Wilburys of shit libs here.
Of shit libs, yeah.
David Dole, Matt Binder, the guy who's from the Surfs. I don't know what his name is. Mike Figueredo, Olayemi Olurin, who I don't know if I'm saying her last name right, but she's actually done some decent work, some decent writing. She's more of an activist and a commentator, but hanging with the wrong crowd here. These guys got a question here about whether the squad was correct to break up the rail worker strike. So let's hear the supergroup here.
The question comes from Belly Bean, and they ask, was the squad correct with their votes on the railroad strike?
They worked with the unions to like, so initially I thought it was dumb like everybody else, but then I was reading from labor reporters, not just like, random people like Jonah Furman, who is a great labor reporter. He said that the reason they voted that way is because unions told them basically to, the idea was they wanted to put up this amendment to add sick days to the Senate, and to do that it has to pass in the House. So the idea was for them to vote for it. Now you could argue, well, then why didn't Rashida Tlaib vote with it? Mm-hmm. And I think I think in terms of strategy, she was correct not to vote with it. But apparently the other members, that's why they voted that way. It isn't to say it was a good strategy or defensive, it's just to explain why they voted that way.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Shama Sawant versus Ryan Grimm debate on this?
No.
It got pretty down to the core at it.
Okay, first of all, what do you mean no? Like, if you do this for a living, you needed to watch that. Like, if you didn't watch that, how can you be informed on this, right? I mean, it's very odd that a guy so concerned with working class labor issues would just skip out, because that was the talk of the YouTube town for like a week after that happened. No, I didn't watch it. It. I was busy sniffing out the transphobes on my Facebook page.
Yeah.
They knew going into this, a lot of the people, like, not the union, you're totally right. Everything you just said is 100% correct. It's what they were asking the squad to do. But this was a DOA, and they should have recognized it as such. There was no way that this was not going to die in the Senate. And it's one of those things like, so what are the two options? A, you don't vote for it, and you hope that enough of you have a strong enough contingent to shut it down, period, because that's what you'd have to do, so it doesn't even go to the Senate. Or you do it that way, knowing full well that it'll die in the Senate, but at least you tried to add that 5-day tack on, is the other problem. But it's weird because it's one of those things, like a union, like anything else, it is fallible. It's human. And the leaders of a union could be wanting or saying things that are not directly in the interest of all the workers, at which point it's up to the people within the union to be able to say, we have to change our management because the union heads are not in our interest. But there's a lot of people within the union who are very upset about what happened because they thought they should have just not voted for it at all. So, and from a political standpoint, it's a nightmare no matter what. If you're a progressive, if you're a squad member, it's lose-lose in both directions. It's either I do what I think is best in opposition to what the union bosses are asking for because I know it's DOA. So I say I'm not voting for this in the House, so it never makes it to the Senate. At which case, a lot of people will be mad because it's like, whoa, you went against what the union asked for. And in the other direction, they do what they did, and everyone is still like, well, what the fuck? But it just died and they got nothing. And now it's over. Like, what do we do now?
Yeah.
So this guy recommended to Mike Figueredo the video of Shama and Ryan Grimm. And it's funny because if you watch that video, I don't know how you can watch that video and then make these points he's making, because these are the exact points that Ryan Grimm was making, and Shama shut him down by saying this kind of obfuscation is really horrible. I mean, Shama Sawant's real deal. She don't pull no punches, right? He says this obfuscation is really terrible. And it really is awful, because he's making it sound like the squad was between a rock and a hard place because they had the union bosses bearing down on them to do what? To do what? To put an amendment forward separate from the original bill that had no chance of passing? You really think the union bosses were bearing down on them for that? According to who? According to who? Ryan Grimm. Ryan Grimm cites Devin Mance as one of the people who told him that. Well, you know who interviewed Devin Mance before Ryan Grimm interviewed Devin Mance? We did. All right. And here's how this
Dun,
actually
dun,
went
dun.
down. All right. We're going to play a clip of ourselves interviewing Devin Mance in just a second, but I just want to set this up because it's very important. They're acting like the squad had their hands tied because on one hand, we have the union bosses wanting us to push through this second bill, which means we have to push through the first bill. And then on the other hand, we have the union workers who are willing to go on strike. Now let's hear how this actually went down. We have more from this group here, but we're going to split this because let's hear what Devin Mance had to say to us about exactly what happened.
I started talking to some really great people out of Cory Bush's office and Jamal Bowman's office and Chuy Garcia's office, and so did our whole legislative department did. And their staffers are really the ones who got this going. And they like that night, they called me and said, "Hey, we're going to submit this. We're going to make a change. We're going to submit an amendment." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And a couple hours later, he calls me. He's like, "Did you hear the good news? Pelosi backed out."
Okay, did you hear that? They called us and said, "Hey, great news. We're going to pass an amendment that guarantees you sick leave. We're going to pass it." Now, it might not pass the Senate because we need 60 in the Senate, but good news, we have a plan. We're going to pass something for you. We're doing our best for you. Great news, Devin.
You know, they basically like pushed her to say that or to come out with the amendment to it. So she was supporting it.
Notice the expression on mine and Russell's faces.
I know. I was just looking at that, like we're both really perplexed. Like,
well, here we push back. Here we are. But ultimately, they pushed both bills through. They did what they did with the Build Back Better last year, which is they pushed both bills through to the Senate, and the Senate voted yes on the bad bill and no on the good bill.
Correct. Yep. And that's how the House had to do it procedurally. I guess I don't know all the details with it.
No, that's not how they. I mean, no.
They did it that way so that it wouldn't pass.
They did it so they could tell you guys they tried their best for you. That's really why they did it that way. That really, I mean, sorry. But that is right. That is what they did. The Congress people, Bowman and Bush, their offices reached out to these unions and say, "Hey, we have a plan to try and get you sick leave," because they knew that they couldn't vote to break up a strike and keep whatever bona fides they had amongst their base. So they had to come up with this other play. They had to come up with this other thing. Hey, and they called them. That's the main takeaway.
Right.
That's the main takeaway. Right? They called them and said, "This is our plan." So what these guys are saying here, which is that their hands were tied because union leadership was asking for this and they didn't know what to do. That's nonsense.
And even if they were, the rank and file union members and union leadership are notoriously out of sync. Hey, you know how the people you get to vote for president are controlled opposition? It's the same thing in union votes.
Absolutely. Well, that's the other point. The other point, and this is what Shama said as well. She said, "I don't need to know what the union bosses want." He says, she's very, very, this is why she's such a good fighter, because she doesn't let people intellectualize things and conceptualize things. She keeps things very concrete. I know I'm a socialist. I don't vote to break up a strike, period. That's all I have to know. I don't have to know what this union boss said or what this union boss said or how many are on one side, how many on the other side. I know I'm a socialist. Socialists don't vote to break up strikes, period. If you have squad members who are in DSA, they cannot vote to break up a strike, period. Right. And they could have voted for one and not the other, or they could have voted no on both until they got guarantees from the Senate that the 7 paid sick days would pass. So, of course, their hands were not tied in this way. And to the extent that they could have affected the outcome, they probably couldn't have affected the outcome, but that's all the more reason why they should have taken a vote. You
draw attention by taking that vote.
Exactly.
If they had been doing what they were sent there to do, arguably the left, the actual left, would be in a very different power position right now. If from the day they had showed, if they had refused to vote for Pelosi, we'd be living in a different world because the whole House would have to worry about pissing off this bloc before they try to do anything in the House. They wouldn't be able to pass anything without them. We'd be in a completely different situation if they had done that from day one.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I want to mention, and then we will play the rest of this, is that you only need to know one thing. And I'll split it up into two parts for the Surfs guy here, since he apparently has a lot of trouble absorbing information like this, since he watched the Shama versus Grimm debate and still thought that this was a good line of argument, right? You need to know two things, okay? You need to know, number one, some union members are willing to strike for the sick days. And then number two, and this is really connected, this is why I say there are only really one. Number two, all of the unions who didn't want to strike, who would have taken the TA, they were all willing to join the picket line with the 4 unions who were willing to strike. So again, that's two facts in one. The number one fact is 12 unions were willing to strike for the sick days. That's called solidarity. Solidarity. I don't know if the leftist mafia understands that term, but that's called solidarity. Okay? And they had it. So all you need to know, if you're a squad member, is that unions are willing to strike for sick days, and you cannot, if you call yourself a progressive, even a progressive, much less a socialist, you cannot get in the way of that. Right. You cannot get in the way. That's all you need to know. It's that simple. It's not any more complicated than that.
You can't be on the wrong side of these things. When I went to Grand Central Terminal, you had the airline pilots there. You had people from the Amazon union there. You had representatives from the teachers union there. You had representatives from the CUNY unions there. That's how it works. And you are not holding up your end of the bargain. You are not doing for what you are doing. And you're going to see this more. We're already seeing this. When was the last time you saw a bunch of progressives get together to phone bank for somebody?
Right. Exactly.
I mean, we don't do it anymore because look what happened.
I think that there is a real difference between doing what the union bosses want and doing what the union workers want, because union bosses aren't infallible. Like, they're good. Like, listening to them isn't necessarily bad, but in this instance, it was very clear that a majority of the workers did not want this deal. So it
doesn't matter if the majority of the workers wanted the deal. What matters is all of the workers were willing to strike in solidarity with those who didn't want the deal.
Did not want this deal. So if I were in Congress, I would have rejected it. Because again, as you said, Lance, like the whole thing was DOA. Like we all knew that this was going to fail anyway. So to just cast that vote in solidarity with workers, I think that would have been a really good symbolic victory. That being said, though, I think that it's not necessarily like a cancelable offense of the squad.
No,
I think that
no, it's not cancelable. It's not like they dead named the trans woman. That
that would be, they'd be all over that. That wouldn't even be
all over that.
They wouldn't even be debating whether they should be well, maybe there would be the whole you got to do a struggle session of contrition.
Right.
And then maybe they can earn their way back.
Right. Did you see her Instagram live video where she apologized for dead naming the trans woman? What'd you think? Was that good enough or not good enough? I thought it was
that.
Okay,
I think she needs to do more.
Yeah,
I think she needs to do more.
I think she needs to listen more. You know, going on air and apologizing, that's not right. You need to listen more. Right. That's
she
what
needs
the
to
socialists
talk about
are
what
really
policies she's going to put forward.
Yeah.
To correct for her behavior here.
Yeah, exactly.
And okay, she's funnier and funnier because I wasn't really paying attention to her. Oliemi, she's like, she knows what's up. Look at her. Doing a show like this, I can tell you never do this.
Yeah, that's not a good posture. Yeah, we've never done that in our history. We've done 8-hour live streams where we've felt pretty tired. We've never done.
That is saying I'm not interested. I'm not into it. I don't agree with it. I'm done. When is this going to be over? You just don't sit like that on the air.
What could be more cancelable for a democratic socialist than to vote to break up a union strike? Like, if that's not cancelable, what is? Shama Sawant wrote it in a little op-ed that preceded her appearance on the show with Ryan Grimm, saying they should be expelled from DSA.
Of course
Absolutely
they should.
Of
course they should. You got socialism right in the name.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
What do you like, the Scientologists? You know, they never kick out the unscientific people in their membership.
Right. I mean, it's not even close.
The problem is that the squad just isn't very politically savvy, and Democratic Party leadership usually runs roughshod over them.
Well, they seem pretty politically savvy because they keep you idiots on board, right? I mean, if you guys aren't crossing them, then there must be kind of politically savvy, right?
And that's really the core issue. They need to get more savvy and strategic. But again, like it was lose all around because it was going to die. It's just a shitty situation.
Okay, this moron, they need to be more savvy and strategic, but it was lose all around. Those are not even logically compatible statements because you're right. It was lose in the sense that the strike was going to be broken up anyway. But if the strike was going to be broken up anyway, it means there was nothing savvy or unsavvy about it. It's simply a vote of principle. It's simply a vote about knowing where you stand with your movement. Right? There's no savvy decision there because the outcome is already in the bank, right? There are enough Democrats and Republicans willing to break up the strike. So therefore, this whole thing about savviness and strategy, that's another buzzword. Push is one word, right? When they say, oh, politicians are going to push for something, that's how you know you're being scammed. And strategy is now the other thing.
That's right up there where they're going to study the issue.
Yeah, right. There was no strategy because the outcome was already predetermined. The only question is, where do you stand in relationship to the movement that put you in office? And they chose. And here these guys are, 5 minutes talking in circles, tying themselves in knots to let them off the hook for it.
But this is what I don't understand about that, because I think probably most of the people listening, and certainly ourselves, I not the rest of them, but David Dole and Mike Figueredo, certainly back during the Bernie days. I listened to both of them. And so much of that movement was a rejection of these kinds of rationalizations, of this kind of politics.
Yes,
it was
excellent point.
It was, we had all been red-pilled in the true sense, and our minds were open to the realization that everything we had been taught about politics was a lie. We were all on the same page, that we had been hoodwinked into this idea of the politics of politeness, the politics. We realized we were shitlibs. Our eyes were opened. We realized that we'd been brainwashed into a politics that only served elites. We were all on the same page about it.
Right.
So how did they get here? Because they're right back to being shitlibs with hipper representatives.
Right.
They've got cooler people that they bow their heads to. Right.
Well, look, this is what some people got upset when, we took issue with Jordan Sheridan's piece. And I don't lump Jordan Sheridan in with these guys. Jordan Sheridan actually reached out during the premiere of that episode.
Right.
And he was nice. We exchanged DMs back and forth, and hopefully when he's back from leave, he will come on and talk about it. Right. I know a lot of the audience here has a hard on for him. I don't, although I do disagree with him on this. And one of the things that I sort of take issue with is this word strategy, as if there is an actual strategy, as if there are wheels in motion towards achieving these big goals, when there so clearly are not. And if you are these guys, you are all in on the idea that we have momentum, that we actually have a real movement, right? That there is progress being made towards things like universal health care and a Green New Deal, right? And there isn't. And to me, the sort of more thematic critique of guys like this, and even guys like Jordan, and like I said, I don't lump Jordan in with these guys in the same way, right? Is they are all in on the idea that there's a train moving forward and that we just have to stay on and push through.
Right.
And I'm sorry, I tune into independent media to be told the truth, not to be gaslit.
Right.
And so, this kind of stuff, this is just more blue pill nonsense, to keep with that metaphor, since I think it's a good one, right? Why would you come here to be told some bullshit rah story about, the squad, they're trying, they got to be more strategic. You got a few of these people are card-carrying DSA members who just voted to break up a strike. How you could be saying anything other than shame on them, they need to be kicked out of that organization. It's not even close. It's
very strange. I don't understand what they're getting out of it, because they both built very solid audiences on outsider politics. So is it that they got cozy with people? Because I haven't seen either one of them land a lot of great guests like Nina or anything. Like, you know, I haven't seen them be given a reason to compromise themselves like this. As far as I know, they don't have Katzenberg money.
I don't understand the audience for this. This is MSNBC
that
with
I don't
shittier
get.
lighting.
That
I mean, that's all.
Right,
it is.
right. Like, why would you watch that? Well, it's the same question with TYT.
Yeah, and this is really quite the embarrassing side project here, the Leftist Mafia.
Just
I mean,
wow.
who is afraid of these people? This is the
What
least
leftists? I don't see any leftists except for the one with her hands behind her head over there.
the one who wants to turn the Zoom screen off.
And since we're talking about this, I just want to add that Biden does have the authority to sign an executive order where he guarantees sick leave by simply saying we're not going to contract with any company that doesn't offer at least 7 paid sick days. Obama did this before. Biden can do that. And then, I mean, these rail companies, they have federal contracts. That's how you effectively do it like that. But he's not doing it. And the real test comes from the pressure. Like, can we exert enough pressure? Can the squad exert enough pressure on Biden to get him to do that? And that is where I think that anyone who's disappointed, that's where you kind of encourage them to move pressure towards Biden. I know that there's a lot of labor activity that is moving towards that currently, but that really is where the pressure needs to be, because that's how you accomplish this now. Yes, he failed the workers.
Well, this whole thing went down about a month ago, so you think that pressure might be a good time.
Yeah, well, they didn't do that. That's the whole point, Mike. It's all of a piece. They didn't. The same people who did not choose to take that vote then are certainly not going to pressure Biden about anything. They're as useless as an asshole right here. They're not going to do any of that.
Because Biden made it clear that his first priority was to stop a strike, not to get the workers the sick leave, but was to stop the strike. And by splitting up the bills and doing exactly what they did in the Build Back Better fight, which is pass both through after promising not to pass either unless they could guarantee that both would pass. They did the exact same thing here, where they passed the shit bill alongside the good bill, knowing full well that the good bill would fail. Here's how certain it was that the good bill would fail. This is going back to the serfs, what he was saying there about how, the union bosses were pushing for this. They knew, they had such certainty that sick leave amendment would fail, that 3 Democrats, Warnock, Cory Booker, Dick Durbin, 3 Democrats sat the vote out entirely. They didn't even bother to show up voting for it. If there were any chance that would pass, don't you think that all the Democrats would have showed up? Hey, we need to get to 60. They had a handful of GOPers on board. So if they thought it was close, if they thought there was a shot, of course they'd have all showed up to vote. But you had 3 Democrats abstain. That's how sure they were that it wasn't going to pass anyway. So how can you say that, how can you even say we tried? It wasn't even a Hail Mary. A Hail Mary means you put everything on the field. That's how Ryan Grimm said. He said, well, they thought of this as a Hail Mary. A Hail Mary means you throw the ball as far as you can down the field, which means you get all your team together to vote. It wasn't even that. It's just nonsense. All right, let's let them finish real quick.
It's a little bit ambiguous as to whether or not what they did was correct. I wouldn't have voted in the way that they did, but if they can get Biden to sign that executive order, it's a win overall. It doesn't matter.
Yep. I agree.
And where are they on that?
I think there's a weird section of the internet that's obsessed with the fact that AOC hasn't unlocked communism yet.
There's a weird faction of the internet that's obsessed
I was
with socialists not breaking up labor strikes. This annoying faction of the internet.
Those people on the internet.
Yeah.
This is, as I've written about extensively, if anyone wants to go back into the article archives, I was a major corporate media addict. I would watch all those Sunday morning roundtables. I would watch Meet the Press, This Week, McLaughlin Group. I was particularly fond of McLaughlin Group. This is like a throwback to that, because after a while, what I realized was a show like the McLaughlin Group is really what you would have if they had had Sunday morning roundtables under Louis XIV, where you just have a bunch of courtiers talking about court gossip. That's what this has turned into. Issue 1, the railroad strike. Are the squad sellouts, or did they have a strategy? Mr. Pat Buchanan.
Yeah, right.
That's it. That's what this has turned into, man. It's the McLaughlin group, just not as entertaining with a bunch of dorks.
Please clap.